Hello, I'm Fully Batibo. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your look at the world of business and economics. This week, the trillion-dollar man, President Biden's plans to revive the pandemic-hit economy, plus promises to create millions of new skilled and green jobs. And is it too late to reset relationships with old friends? After being spurned by Trump, Europe has been pushing through its own economic and geopolitical agenda that could be problematic for Biden's administration. We'll get the view from the EU when we talk to Malta's foreign minister. Plus, Nigeria's population will double by the middle of the century. Can farmers meet the demand? The United Nations is warning drought and terror attacks could lead to famine in the north of the country. The first major legislation for President Joe Biden, unsurprisingly, is getting the pandemic under control with a massive injection of money targeting the most needy. The headline number, $1.9 trillion, will go some way to provide an additional shot to the economy. But what about his other plans for the economy? Well, during his campaign, tackling inequality and wealth disparities were top of the agenda. The selection of his economic team gives us a hint at what to expect. Janet Yellen will be the first woman to become the Treasury Secretary. She urged lawmakers to spend big to save the economy and worry about debt later. Yellen also said corporations and the rich will need to pay their fair share. Neera Tanden is the first woman of color to head the Office of Management and Budget. Tanden was brought up by a mother who had to rely on food stamps to feed her family after her divorce and supports a strong social safety net. Adewale Wali Adeomo, Nigerian-born Adeomo, will be the first black person to serve as Deputy Treasury Secretary. He wrote on Twitter he wanted to make sure that our economy works not just for the wealthy, but for the hardworking people who make it run. Cecilia Roos will be the first black chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. Roos is an expert in labor markets and has championed paid sick leave. Last year, nearly 34 million workers, about a quarter of the U.S. workforce, lacked paid sick leave. And according to accountancy firm Deloitte, the pandemic is going to make U.S. income inequality worse. It says the proportion of wealth held by the richest 10% has jumped from about 61% to 70%. And for the top 1%, it rose from 17% to 26%. That's over the past 30 years. While the economy is expected to eke out a small gain for 2020, the unemployment rate stood at 6.8% in December. Getting people back into work will be a priority. Biden has pledged $2 trillion for infrastructure projects to create millions of jobs. That includes 1 million jobs in the auto industry as the sector moves to producing electric cars. Another 250,000 jobs will be created by capping abandoned oil and natural gas wells and reclaiming abandoned coal, hard rock, and uranium mines. But the most ambitious challenge starts by rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, which President Trump delighted in leaving. Biden is planning to invest $400 billion over 10 years in green technology, in the process creating 10 million jobs. Well, it's events like wars, pandemics, and natural disasters that give countries the urge to renew and set inequalities right. Can Biden see this ambitious plan through? Joining me now from Oxford, England, is Professor William Barnard from Democrats Abroad. He's also the author of Dixiecrats and Democrats. Professor Barnard, thank you for talking to us on Counting the Cost. So what do we learn from the president's selection of his economic team? Is it business as usual, or can we expect greater oversight of the financial sector?
Well, I think many of them are very familiar faces. I mean, his appointment as Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, has been met with almost universal approval across the political spectrum. She has 20 years of experience with the Fed itself and with the government, 15 years in the San Francisco Fed, and then 4 years as chair. And I think generally looked upon as a very competent individual and one who is perhaps as best prepared to take over the Treasury as anyone in recent history. Biden tried, I think, to appeal. He knows he has to keep his party united, and he's tried to appeal across the board in his appointments. One of them, the Deputy Treasury Secretary, Adeomo, is a Nigerian-born lawyer, but he has worked both sides of the aisle since. And he was Timothy Geithner's chief of staff in the Treasury years ago, and then he worked also with Senator Warren in the Consumer Finance Bureau. So he gets along across the board. There are some people who've been critical of some of the backgrounds, some of the previous statements of some of the appointees, but mostly it's a middle of the road, left of center group that has appeal pretty much across the political spectrum.
Right, and precisely on that, I mean, working with both sides of the aisle, the Democrats have a slim majority in the House. Are you worried that some policy decisions will be bogged down or even watered down as a result?
One of the lessons of the reaction to the crisis back in March and April was that we did things right for the first time in an economic crisis. We went bold, we went big, and we went quick. That slowed down after the third bill passed, and we had some difficulty getting the last bill through. It will be difficult, I think. It's a hard lift, but nonetheless, I think it's doable. We do need, in my view, and in the view of most economists, I think, another significant stimulus package in order to bridge the gap to when the economy recovers after the virus is under control. And it needs to be relatively big. There will be some disagreements with that. There are already some rumblings, particularly in more conservative Republican circles, and also from some Democrats about the size of the debt, which has grown enormously. I mean, the response to this economic crisis was an order of magnitude greater than the response back in 2007, 2008, and 2009. We did it right for the first time in some time, and it worked well, but we need one more push to get through. It will be difficult to get through a closely divided Senate and House.
Right, and one of the much anticipated plans is for infrastructure, and these usually take a decade or more in planning, to completion and so on. Do you think there are projects that are already shovel ready from a political point of view? Obviously, Biden needs to show that jobs are being created by the time the next election comes around. How will he be able to do that, you think?
We've been talking about a major infrastructure bill for well over a decade. The federal highway system, which started in the 1920s and then in the 1960s with the interstate highways being built under Eisenhower, they badly are in need of repair. The roads and bridges of the country need a great deal of attention. We've talked about this for some time. Typically, an infrastructure bill receives support on both sides of the aisle. Both parties have an interest in construction jobs and getting the economy going and all the rest. So it's perhaps a little surprising that we haven't been able to do something to this point. I think we're at the point where the general recognition is there that something major needs to be done. I think it will be done. Whether or not there are enough shovel-ready programs, many of these have been in planning for quite some time. It does take some time to get up and going, but nonetheless, it's badly needed. And I think you will see some action on infrastructure in a major way this session.
What about inequality? How do you start to redress inequality? I mean, there's a proposed tax on those who earn more than $400,000 a year. Will that be sufficient?
This is one of the fundamental problems facing almost every major economy around the world. The major advanced economies have all seen a growing disparity in economic wealth within themselves. While around the world over the last decade, there's been much raising up of relatively poor countries and a leveling up of a good deal. But within countries, particularly major advanced countries, there's been a growing disparity. It's one of the most difficult and intransigent problems that we face. It's also one that isn't easily amenable. We don't know quite what to do. It has occurred under governments of all stripes, left and right. It has occurred in almost every advanced country. We are a little at sea how best to deal with it. The one thing we can do is not enact tax policies as was done under the last administration, with the tax cuts going primarily to the upper ranks within the income structure, not enact policies that exacerbate and make worse the disparity of income. But there are any number of measures, including support for education, including minimum wage increases and the rest, that will have to be taken. That, too, is a long-term problem and not one easily amenable.
But what about a wealth tax? Do you think there should be a wealth tax on those newly minted tech billionaires, for instance?
I think there are probably other ways and better ways of raising significant sums of money. Wealth taxes have proven in the past, when they've been adopted by a number of countries, particularly in Europe, not to be particularly effective, and generally have been abandoned after some time because it was easy enough to move capital around, and capital flies from one place to another with the punch of a button these days. So it's not necessarily the easiest or best way, I believe, in raising the funds that will be necessary. There will be necessary tax increases, to be sure, and tax rebalances and all the rest. But I don't think a direct wealth tax is necessarily the most effective or efficient way to do that.
Thank you very much, Professor William Barnard, for talking to us on Counting the Cost. Thank you for your time.
Glad to.
Now, President Trump antagonized many of America's traditional allies, including the European Union. There were demands that NATO nations should contribute more funding to the military alliance, tariffs on steel, and as an outgoing salvo, more tariffs on aircrafts. While the Biden administration would like to reset many of those relationships, there are stumbling blocks, like the EU's decision to strike an investment agreement with China. Well, let's talk through what the relationship could look like with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Affairs of Malta, Evarist Bartolo. Foreign Minister Bartolo, thank you very much for talking to us on Counting the Cost here at Al Jazeera. So let's start with the relationship, the future relationship between the European Union and America. The Biden administration, the new administration in the US, has expressed an interest in working closely with its traditional allies. I imagine first that comes as a welcome relief for the European Union, that there's a new administration at the White House.
Yes, and even on his first day, Biden, the fact that he said we'll be rejoining the Paris Agreement on climate change, and also regarding the World Health Organization, that is very welcome. At the same time, we must not expect Biden to be a miracle worker. It doesn't mean that the new administration, it's a new dawn, it's a new day. But even that new day might have clouds, might have storms, might have disagreements. But the style of Biden is totally different.
Right.
Disagreements doesn't mean that we turn against each other into enemies. We sit down and discuss.
Right.
It's going to be possible with the Biden administration.
There are disagreements, a lot of them, on tariffs, for instance. For the European Union, I want to know, to work closely with the US, to return to that old relationship. What are the conditions, if any?
Probably from both sides, in the sense that, like, for example, the investment agreement with China. It also depends on how the Biden administration is going to position itself regarding China. What we expect from the Biden administration is to have a multilateral approach, that we can sit down and discuss, and not expect the world to simply divide into supporters or opponents.
Right.
That even when we disagree, we can still agree on other areas.
Would the European Union, for instance, demand that the US drop the tariffs on the EU that the Trump administration imposed?
I think that the negotiation will show that both sides will have to make major concessions. While we talk about this, but let's keep in mind that the first priority, I think, of the Biden administration is not going to be what happens beyond America's shores, but what happens inside the United States. Because the United States is a broken society. There are a lot of important issues that have to be addressed in terms of the effect of the pandemic, and also in terms of the wide, painful polarization that there is in American society.
Right. Well, let's focus on the EU itself right now. It introduced a $1 trillion budget and stimulus, $540 billion for green investment. What does that mean to you exactly?
Yeah, I think that is very important. I think it's very positive that we are putting together economic development and what we're going to do about the climate.
Right.
We have come to a point now, it's a tipping point, where unless we really take serious steps to deal with the economic and the development and the climate emergency at the same time, we will not save this planet. At the moment, perhaps the only thing we can do, and that's very important, even somebody like David Attenborough says this, we will slow down global warming. Eventually, if we really slow it down, we can reverse it. We can only do that with the kind of economic development, the model of consumption, the model of production, our lifestyle, how we travel, how we consume, and how we produce things. So the fact that we are combining those two together, and especially this is where perhaps the pandemic is offering us an opportunity, because we need to reimagine, we need to reinvent our economy, and the best way to do it now is to come back. Okay, I know it's a slogan to build back better, but we really need to do that. And it's not now it's not a choice anymore. It has really become a necessity. What is important is that we start taking steps and that it doesn't take too long to make use of these funds, because there are countries where it is really a problem.
Thank you very much, Foreign Minister Bartolo, for talking to us. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, when you think about the Nigerian economy, we have an oversized view of the oil industry. It's a big contributor to the government's revenue, but it represents just about 10% of the economy. About 50% of the country's 200 million plus population are dependent on the agriculture industry, which represents about a fifth of the economy. But it doesn't bring in the money like oil, and it's facing some big challenges, especially when you think by the middle of the century, it would have to feed a population that is likely to double to more than 400 million. Right now, the United Nations has warned northwest Nigeria is at risk of famine due to the pandemic, climate change, and violence. Drought, desertification, and loss of forests are changing the agricultural landscape, threatening the livelihoods of 40 million people. That's led to clashes between roaming cattle herders and small family-owned farms. Adding to the problem, Nigeria's cattle population has doubled to 20 million since 1981. And late last year, Boko Haram killed dozens of farm workers in retribution for cooperating with the Nigerian military. Attacks on farmers, climate change, and the pandemic are also threatening food reserves. The Oil Farmers Association of Nigeria warned that stocks have declined to less than 30,000 metric tons, a fraction of what it requires to feed the population. Kabir Ibrahim is the group president of the Oil Farmers Association of Nigeria, AFAN. He sat down with our West Africa correspondent Ahmed Idris to talk about the challenges farmers, herders, and government face. Ahmed began by asking him if programs led by the World Bank to reverse the impact of desertification and climate change were working.
Many people all over the world are in denial of especially climate change, but we are very conscious of desertification because we are near Niger Republic. And then all these projects, when they come in, there is a lot of advocacy in them. We are aware that they are going on, and there is a lot of improvement in our culture in farming. The only thing that we have not yet seen is the translation into the yield. But certainly a lot of effort is going on, and the impact is felt.
Now, one persistent problem, it's been an age-long problem, is the conflict between farmers and cattle herders. Are there workable solutions in place to deal with this, and how is it impacting agriculture?
You see, in Nigeria, this problem became worrisome, I believe, in the last 20 years. And then, unfortunately, in the last 20 years is the period during which politics came in. Hitherto, we had a very good relationship between farmers and pastoralists or herders, because we all belong to the same family. If you have a herd of cattle or sheep or whatever, you are a farmer. So we have, in fact, there is a lot of synergy between us and the Miyetti Allah. When I was growing up, I used to escort my father to the farm on horseback, and there would be these Fulani people, herdsmen, in their huts, at the border of the farm. They will be waiting for us to finish harvesting. They would go in and eat the residue, and then their animals will drop their dung, and that's what we used for fertilizer. So we had a symbiotic relationship. Quarrels would come, but they were mainly very small skirmishes. At most, you know, the pastoralists would use their stick, you know, the stick that they used to call.
And now they use
guns. But now
guns.
they use guns, and then you can just see that the herders suffer the same fate as the farmers, because they are bandits, they are kidnappers, all involved in this whole thing. The cattle rustler is not necessarily a herdsman. He is somebody who wants to have herd that he doesn't have.
So basically, are there things that have been put in place, like solutions put in place, either by farmers and herders themselves or by the government or community itself to deal with this problem?
There are so many efforts by the farmers, the herders, the government, and even some organizations, even some like USAID. And there are so many organizations here in this country that participate in the peace conferences that we have. We have had training by the Klingindale Institute on management, crisis management. The herders were there, the farmers were there. We all have certificates from there. We know how to deal with each other, how to accommodate each other, how to have a synergy between us. It's going on, and then government is doing a program here. They call it the Livestock Transformation Plan, where it will semi-sedentarize the herders, give them all the facilities that they lack, give them education, because most of the problem is lack of education. So a lot of effort is going on.
So it looks like the problem in the agriculture sector are so numerous, from the provision of inputs, the conflict between farmers and herders, water problems, climate change, and all that. Are these government intervention programs to solve these problems working?
Well, I believe we can have more, like Oliver Twist. We should do more. We should do more. And the institutions have to work. This is the bane of our society. The institutions must work. And the current president is an epitome of what should be in Nigeria. But he needs people of like mind to work with to achieve all this. So the appointment of people into places must be looked upon. You must not do it because of, certain very maybe oligarchies or religion or tribes or whatever. You must do it on merit. You must put the right people in the right place. Otherwise, things will never work. You know, our diversity, we should take advantage of our diversity.
Now, in terms of the impact of agriculture in Nigeria, it looks like agriculture in this country, despite the involvement of half the population in the sector, is not as productive when compared to states like, or countries like the United States, where hundreds of billions of dollars is being contributed by the agriculture sector to the American economy, for example. But here in Nigeria, and as in many other African countries, the opposite is the same. Why is it so?
Many reasons. 150 years ago, agriculture was the same here as in the United States. But you know, there is mechanization now. There is a lot of research. And the yield is higher. So the population of farmers in the United States is now barely 2% because of mechanization, replacement of human labor with machine labor. And then a lot of the research findings are being put in place. So productivity is higher. Therefore, agriculture is really contributing to the GDP. In Nigeria, even when we used to use crude methods, we had lived on agriculture. There is no reason why we shouldn't do that again. And this is why we are here today. We are trying to restore the dignity of agriculture. And Nigeria is going to do it thanks to the focus of this administration. But we need this policy to continue. You know, we don't want to have breaks in the policies because there is a change in government. If once you do that in Africa, you will get there. It takes time. In Europe, I mean, in the UK, for instance, we used to go there every year for the Royal Agric Show. In England, the population of farmers is about 3%. In France, about 3%. But they used to be as high as we have here today. So this is work in progress, and we hope that things will get there. But we need focus, we need reappraisal, we need reorientation, and we need to mechanize. And to mechanize, we do not have to import wholesale what is available abroad. We must use our technology incubation centers to repair what has gone bad and to improvise and build certain things that are indigenous to us. That way we will improve our agriculture. Look at Brazil. Hitherto Brazil was a third world country, but agriculture has made it something else because they are looking inwards and they are producing a lot and they are now exporting.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Sir.
Thank you very much.
And that is our show for this week. Get in touch with us by tweeting me, Fuliba AJE, and do use the hashtag AJCTC when you do. Or drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. But there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has entire episodes for you to watch and to catch up on. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Fuliba Thibault from the whole team. Thank you for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.